Well, hello there.
Hi.
How are you, Internet and Joel?
Hey, how are you, Lynn?
I am great, and good evening to everybody who is out there. This is Pastor Lane Nelson and Pastor Joel Paikin coming to you live this Tuesday night from Eastside Lutheran Church in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Always a joy to be with you folks for our Together in Faith series that we do each Tuesday night. A chance for us to look at the faiths of others that we might grow in our own, to ask some questions about texts or other religions or you name it. The topics kind of range all about, but at the heart of it is asking those questions so that we can continue to stretch ourselves, maybe challenge some preconceived notions that we might hold, that we might see how God's Spirit is working in the world around us and in ourselves, so that we can live our faith as faithfully as possible. It is, like we say, always a gorgeous Tuesday night here in the city of Sioux Falls, and it appears to be that way again. Wonderful temperatures, not too hot, not too cold, not much wind.
Which is great.
Yeah. And I am here with Joel. Over the course of the summer, there were very few opportunities when we were in the same place on a Tuesday night. So.
Yeah. You know, one of the conversations that we, this has nothing to do with anything.
Sure.
I'm just thinking of it now, just like completely off the cuff, because I had a conversation with, when my in-laws came to visit, that we're fairly certain that my mother-in-law lived for a couple years early in her childhood in a house I'm looking at over your shoulder.
No way.
Yeah, that's Van Epps, right?
Yeah.
Van Epps. That yellow tan house right there.
Really?
Yeah. So we're pretty certain that house in Van Epps is the actual house that my mother-in-law lived in for a couple of years. She was a child. Yeah. See if you can get over there.
So that would be.
Yeah, that one right there
with the brown roof, the two-story.
Yep, exactly it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So this conversation came up when they were visiting this summer. So.
Hi, Joel's family.
Well, yeah, Amy's mom. So yeah.
Joel's mother-in-law.
Yeah, it's great.
Wow.
So I hadn't thought about I was going to mention this in some way, and then like you just said, we have been for so much of the summer that it just completely passed my mind.
So do you feel now that in some way your mother-in-law's watching you?
Dun, dun, dun. No, but it is really interesting to think about connection.
Yeah.
So I helped lead music. Amy and I led music this morning at Augustana University, and there was various people who we've known for many, many years, but now we live in this city, right? And so there was conversations that were happening from folks that we've known in all these other times and places, but of course now we live in their city, which was really, really interesting. And so here's this connection with my mother-in-law. I was texting someone before we got on who, again, was just going back oh, well, we've known each other for 15, 20 years. But I just moved to South Dakota, and he's just moved out of South Dakota. Okay. So we were joking. We had to put our plans for world domination on hold because we can never live in the same place. But
nice.
yeah. Well, anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yeah. See what happens when we don't get together in the same room. So for so long.
We are here, but we're not alone. I see we have several folks who are online joining us. Colin and Harriet have jumped on, and Colleen is on. Connie is here. And Irene. So nice to have you participating in the conversation tonight. You are certainly a part of this room. If you did something strange or were running around someplace unusual this summer, throw that up in the chat as well. It'd be fun to kind of share where people were at over the course of the summer. And really, I think summer is kind of officially dead now, isn't it? We have hit Labor Day on yesterday. No more can we wear white pants.
Oh, wow.
Things like that.
Ugh,
and it's officially fall. Pants. I know, right? If you have a picture of yourself in white pants, post that on the chat. That would be fun, too. Yeah. Oh, and Carol jumped in also. Nice to have you here, Carol. Yeah. Well, there are lots of stuff going on here in the community at East Side Lutheran as we come together. The first that we would like to mention would be the Eastside Lutheran Church Rummage Sale, which has gathered quite a reputation in the city of Sioux Falls over the last number of years. It will run for the 9th, 10th, and 11th. That's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week.
Now, do I have it correct, Lane? I'm just going to look it up here in my calendar to see. It starts at 10 a.m., I think. Is that true?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe, but I was thinking earlier, like 8.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Look at that.
Ooh.
See? Here it is on the card. 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., Thursday and Friday. And then Saturday, it's running 8 a.m. to noon on Saturday.
Get there while the deals are hot.
Yep. Okay. Good,
nice.
good.
But that's not the only thing going on, because then on Saturday, what do we have else?
We have the neighborhood block party.
Woo-hoo!
So 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., 2 hours, we're going to have block party. We're going to have some inflatable games, some free food and beverages. It's going to be an opportunity to register for Sunday school. So if you're in the community and come out for some free grilled food and some games for kiddos.
Hundreds of Nathan's hot dogs, the big ones, in the kitchen here earlier.
Oh, wow.
So
excellent. All right. Yeah. Good. Yep. So we're getting ready for that. That's going to be Saturday. And then Sunday is...
Whoa, there's more going on Saturday.
Oh, wait.
We are having for the first time ever that I'm aware of in the congregation's history, though I'm sure that might be wrong, a Saturday worship. We are starting this fall holding Saturday worships at 5:30. They will be here at the Eastside Sanctuary. We used to run a Sunday evening worship before the pandemic, and then that all kind of paused. And so now, as we are kind of getting into this new fall, we are going to try something a little bit different. So it's a wonderful way to start the weekend, focus kind of in prayer and scripture and Holy Communion. So it'll be a little bit shorter than a traditional worship service. The music we're going to have is going to be largely on piano, but that won't be too much music, a few hymns or songs, but really focusing on the Word and on the meal is really kind of what that service will be. So starting this week, Saturday, 5:30 worship. Then Sunday, bring your backpacks to church. We don't say that very often, but we will be having the blessing of the backpacks for all of our school-aged children and our adults. If you want to bring your briefcase, you could do that. I think that would be cool to see people coming with their briefcases or whatever it is that you haul stuff to and from for work or school. It can be blessed. And we're doing it then because something else starts this Sunday.
Sunday school.
Yes.
Yeah. So registration, you can do it now online at eastsidellc.org. You can register for Sunday school online, but they'll also be in person doing registrations at the block party on Saturday, and the first day of Sunday school is Sunday. And even if you don't get registered, come on Sunday and we'll get you all set up. So that's going to be happening during the 10 o'clock service. And so we'll start each day with a time in worship together, all ages, and then our youngest Eastsiders will head downstairs with their Sunday school teachers for the remainder of the service. That'll be our tradition this year. And so we are starting with, of course, the blessings of the backpacks, and then we'll all the kiddos will head downstairs for Sunday school after the blessing of the backpacks.
That's going to be so weird in a normal way, because last year Sunday school was just so different, and so this year we're going to be kind of going into more of a traditional quote-unquote kind of Sunday school where they'll have teachers in their rooms as opposed to online things that we did in large groups or whatever. So that'll be good. We're getting excited for that. So that brings us to the logical then piece of Together in Faith, Suffering for the Gospel.
Right.
Not a very smooth transition from
completely smooth.
Block parties and rummage sales and Sunday schools to suffering for the gospel. But we are looking at the text for this coming weekend, and the gospel comes to us from Mark. And that's a big part of this reading.
Yeah, well, it's a big part of the Gospel of Mark, right?
Yeah.
The Gospel of Mark is this text that was, it's apocalyptical. It's about the apocalypse. It's kind of the tension between Rome and Israel is at a fever pitch at the time that the Gospel of Mark is written, and so there's just a lot of kind of speculation about, is this the end? Is this the end? Is this the end? And so that gets kind of infused into the Gospel, and so we hear that pretty palpably in this text, right?
Yeah, very much. So, what do you do when you have a topic come up in life these days? You Google it and see what happens. Right. So we did a little Google search for suffering. What is suffering? And the definition, I can't say it's a Webster definition. It's probably a Wikipedia definition. To experience or be subjected to something bad or unpleasant, or to tolerate it. Not a super lighthearted topic.
Right.
I'm going to guess that our listeners out there, our conversation partners, probably have experienced on some level suffering in their own life, whether it was emotional or physical or what have you. It's not uncommon. If you are human in this world, you've experienced suffering at some point in time.
Yeah.
So we try not to take that too lightly.
Sure.
But it certainly raises some questions when you think of that concept of suffering and hold it alongside or juxtapose it with your faith, specifically faith in Jesus Christ. Because in this passage, which we'll get to in just a second, it kind of says if you are going to be a Christian, if you are going to be a person who follows Jesus, expect to have some suffering.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So we have that come up. And then also this other topic, Jesus will pose the question, we'll hear it in a minute, who do you say I am? So let that roll around in your head a little bit too. Who do you say that Jesus is? Because that's a question that he asks of his disciples.
Yep.
The passage that we will be looking at is Mark 8:27-38. Take up your cross. That's another phrase. There's lots of stuff in this relatively short passage that we think of in church and associate with Christianity. But as we talked about last week, geography in Scripture gives us so much more information about what's going on than just pin drops on a map. And we talked about that last week with Jesus going off to Tyre and then by way of Sidon and then through the Decapolis.
Yep.
All of the theology of those places gets infused in with the story that's going on. It becomes a natural backdrop, a setting for what will take place.
Which is interesting to think about. You know, if we think about this, the theology of these geographies, of these places, that same paradigm exists for us, right? We have in America theologies that are present. We have in South Dakota theologies that are present. We have in Sioux Falls theologies that take precedent, and we even have here at Eastside Lutheran Church certain theologies that take a precedent, kind of lift up.
Sure.
And so, like, when we study these things and we talk about these different places, we can think about those things also in the context of what are the things that we lift up as a community? What's the context in which we live in theologically? That's an interesting thing to consider. Right? Yeah.
You, I couldn't help but think of this as you were talking. I used to live in New Orleans, as you did too.
Yep.
And so if you were to say that and then tell a story, just like you see on TV or a movie, they name a city and then the listener or the viewer has so much more information. You know, so if you're going to be saying New Orleans, you're going to think of all kinds of other things connected to this story, from food to floods to voodoo to Mardi Gras to on and on, which then nuance what you're doing. So the location tonight in this story is Caesarea Philippi.
Yep.
So Philip's Caesarea. This is a location kind of again north of the Holy Land, if you will, just a little bit. They say that in essence, kind of the Jordan River kind of comes out of this area and then flows down from there. Very much kind of a Greek area, very much ruled by eventually the Roman Empire and all of these kind of pieces. But at its heart here in Caesarea Philippi, what it was known for, that thing that gets attached, was there was a big shrine to the god Pan. And even the name today for the place, which is like Banus or something along that line, is just a translation down from Pan. And so you have this pagan god who is kind of, I think, the god of desolate places, but then there's so much more than all kinds of other ritual. You can do a little Googling and find out more about it. It seems like an odd place for Jesus to be with his disciples.
Yeah, what was he doing up there?
I don't know. I hope not bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because it was known for Pan's Grotto, which then brings all kinds of other weird imagery with it, you know?
Sure. Yeah, it was like one of those retreat places. Like he got an Airbnb deal. You know, it's like, well, let's take the guys up there because, you know, $50 a night. Yeah.
But if we jump back to last week's text, we can see Jesus was going through Tyre and Sidon and the Decapolis, and so he's kind of working his way through these non-Hebrew areas, getting ready and doing some Gentile ministry before he starts making his way back down to Jerusalem, and then the things that transpire there with the crucifixion and all of that.
Sure.
So we have, again, Jesus in this foreign place having a conversation at the shrine of another god, asking that question, who do you say that I am? So we are going to be reading this. We'll take small sections here, one at a time, and ask some questions. Before we do that, a quick hi to Rini, who also has jumped in and joined this conversation. So the first segment of Mark 27 to 38 is 27 to 30. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him.
That word, you know, that in the Greek there is you are the Christ, the Christos, and so we have that connection, that direct connection to Christ, Messiah. That's it's you talk about like people I've heard it said, you know, in various points in my life around this scripture where Peter, you know, he says this amazingly powerful thing, and like as a kid I remember thinking like it's 4 words. Well, that's so powerful, you know. But there is like that being direct, right? Peter kind of being you know, king of directness, sometimes directly the wrong way, but king of directness, right? And so you are the Christ. Yeah, it's really interesting.
And for someone who is steeped in their Jewish heritage and all of that, to name another person, a flesh and blood person, in their midst, and say that they are the promised Messiah, they are the Christ, they are God's anointed. It's a pretty bold statement, you know?
I wonder, you know, there's a small band of people. They're kind of walking through what would be some kind of a foreign experience, you know, think like Saskatchewan. And
Saskatchewan.
They're like walking through, you know,
that's
like
awful close to North Dakota.
Right,
man.
there it is, right? But well, they're just north, right?
Yeah,
you know, and so they're walking through this place. They're having these conversations. Jesus asks, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter says,
Winnipeg,
"You are the
of
Christ."
the Holy Land.
and
That's Manitoba, sorry.
But I wonder if the boldness with which Peter makes that proclamation, then in the conversation, you know, when somebody says something bold, how that emboldens you, you know, in that conversation, because the next thing Jesus does is way off, you know, it's left field, right? It's just so, like, Peter says this bold thing, and then Jesus responds with something even more crazy. And
before we get to that, I can't help but also then ask that question: what does that mean for us? If Jesus is asking his disciples, then who do people say that I am? Who do we say that he is in our own lives, and how does it show up? I mean, I think we would all like to say, yeah, you're the Messiah, you're the Christ. But do we? I mean, we do, but do we, as we then live out life in the actions we take and the decisions we make, and you know how we spend our time, our money, our talents, those kinds of things?
Yeah, how is Christ something more than just Jesus' last name.
Yeah.
Right.
Which maybe that's why we get this challenge then that comes up next in 31. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be subjected to the elders, the chief priests, the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things."
So, to that point of Peter making that bold proclamation, and that word in verse 33, when he said this quite openly, that word, I'm going to murder the pronunciation here, parisia, is boldness. He said it boldly. So Jesus then kind of like ups the ante and says, yes, I'm the Christ, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to rise again in 3 days. And before that, all the suffering. So, like, it's like you can just imagine the animation that's happening in this dialogue.
Sure.
This group of people as they're walking, and they're just kind of just engaging. It's one of those times when you can kind of think about just a really engaging conversation that you've had that really just kind of like shifted your perspectives. And then Peter says, wait a second, time out.
You can almost hear Peter going, hey, Jesus, you're not helping the cause very much here, right? We're trying to get these people here to understand that you're the one we've been waiting for.
Right.
And to say you're going to be killed and all of this, and that there's going to be suffering you're going to have to go through, that's not what people want to hear.
Well, how often have we been in a conversation, right, where someone starts really sharing something that's deeply felt, and someone else in the room just isn't ready for that level of depth.
Sure.
And so they're just like, anything to kind of move the conversation out of that because someone in the room isn't ready for
Jesus,
that.
you're oversharing.
Right, yeah. Right, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting to me to think about like if this were a conversation we were having today, and we were in this kind of dialogue with Jesus and Peter's like, well, that's a lot. Could we talk about the weather? And Jesus responds, because Peter's trying to kind of put the lid on this, and Jesus is like, nope. But now, turning and looking at his disciples. So Peter takes him aside.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter's like, I'm not going to rebuke the boss publicly, but takes him aside. And I'm guessing everyone knows what is happening, right, on some level, because Jesus feels like he has to actually respond to the whole group. So, but turning and looking at his disciples, he rebukes Peter. Wow, it's so interesting.
Which then leads us to the last paragraph of this section. So after just doing this, and after rebuking Peter and calling him Satan, he then called the crowd with his disciples. So he says, hey, gather around. And said to them, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in his glory, or in the glory of his Father with the holy angels.
Boom.
Yeah, mic drop.
Yeah, man. So again, I think like the theology that is at play in Mark being a text that is about the apocalypse, about the end of the end. You hear it in Jesus' own words here. He is referencing the end of the end. It's powerful, right?
Well, I think it's so counterintuitive for us. Calling crowds together and said, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Those who want to save their life will lose it. I mean, we often today think of Christianity as being something that is comforting. and people are so often drawn to the church because they're looking for some kind of comfort. You know, there's that old axiom from the 60s, you know, religion is the opiate of the masses, you know.
Sure.
On some level, it's true, yeah, right. And we don't necessarily think about, hey, I want to be a follower of Jesus, and you know what? It ain't going to be easy.
Right.
And it ain't going to be easy for my family and for so many others.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the Marxist critique of religion is valid if that's all that your religion is. If your religion is all comfort, because clearly Jesus has a different agenda here.
Oh yeah.
And so if we are followers of Jesus, then it's not about our kind of comfort on some level. Now, I think that there is comfort in saying death doesn't win. Like, that's a very comforting thing. Something that even is so comforting that we might proclaim it boldly, as Jesus does. You know, bold words. That's what Jesus says, right? But that's not all there is to it. I think, like, one of those things is like when Jesus starts talking about, like, oh, you know, we're going to have to suffer. How would we know what comfort is without suffering? How would we know what joy is without suffering? If all we had was a comfortable life. Yeah.
And I think kind of going back to that context piece that we started talking about too is where we sit in the United States of America and read this text is wholly different than if we were in a war-torn part of the world right now. And there are many war-torn parts of the world or places that are undergoing poverty and all kinds of injustices.
Yeah.
And to hear these words in that context might mean something a little more different to us.
Yep.
And when you're undergoing all kinds of suffering anyway, the suffering that brings about justice, the suffering that brings about life out of a bad situation, the suffering that brings about there is a hope out there, is wholly different than when we're in our comfortable lives that many of us experience.
Yeah.
And maybe even here in America, depending on where you're sitting, if you were to read this text from an impoverished kind of a situation where you were really worried about where your next meal was coming from, this too might ring differently.
Well, I think it is interesting, right, to think about Jesus in the context of in the midst of our suffering. But then for those of us who are in this moment not hungry, or for those of us in this moment who do have a roof over our heads, and for those of us in this moment who are comfortable, what does that mean? Does that lead us to action? Because if it doesn't lead us to action out of our own comfort, then we probably haven't heard the gospel, right? Because that leads to action. The good news that death doesn't win would lead us to action. And if it hasn't, then maybe we haven't quite heard the good news yet. Yeah.
I just threw up the question on the screen, how do we forfeit our life? Where Jesus says over this, those who lose their life for my sake, for the sake of the gospel, will save it. For what does it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Again, Jesus is being bold, right? He's putting it out there and on the line and saying, now the gospel results in action.
Yeah. Reminds me of that Dietrich Bonhoeffer quote, Christ is the man for the other.
Yeah, yeah, and the church is only the church when it is the church for the other.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, yep. Yeah, good times, man.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite the little retreat they're on out
here.
Yeah. Well, those are a lot of things to be thinking about. What does it mean to suffer for our faith? What does it mean to forfeit our life to be a follower of Jesus? Because that's what he's saying here, that you have to give up a chunk of who you are if you're going to actually follow this Messiah who I am that you are saying that I am. And it won't always be easy to be a Christian, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. Well, may God meet you with those challenges, but also words of hope in the midst of whatever suffering you might be experiencing tonight as we participate our conversation with one another.
Yeah.
So before we close with Luther's evening prayer, hello to Janet and hello to Shar. Nice to have you with us whenever you join the conversation. And nice to be able to sit down next to you tonight, Joel.
Yeah, good conversation tonight.
Bounce things back so people don't get tired of hearing just my voice when I'm here. So, but why don't we close with prayer? I give thanks to you, my heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have graciously protected me today. And I ask you to forgive me all my sins where I have done wrong, and graciously to protect me tonight. For into your hands I commend myself, my body, my soul, and all that is mine. Let your holy angel be with me, so that the wicked foe may have no power over me.
Amen.
And may we all go off to sleep quickly and easily tonight, assured that we will wake up with Christ.
Yeah. Oh, and a quick shout. There's so many things happening this week. But we are starting confirmation. Orientation is tomorrow.
Yes, we are.
At 7 o'clock. So confirmation age families joining us at 7 o'clock. And then 8 o'clock, youth group, folks interested, families interested in attending, having their youth attend the National Youth Gathering. That'll be an 8 o'clock meeting tomorrow to chat about the National Youth Gathering next summer. So postponed a year because of COVID, but looking forward to that. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Hey, have a good night.
Good night.